Before Canada was Canada, what we now call our home province, British Columbia, was the most linguistically diverse population within the country. The estimated amount of First Nations living in BC was one-third of the whole country, ranging from 200,000 to 1 million prior to first contact. This dramatically changed in 1862. In 1862, a boatload of miners from San Francisco arrived in Victoria, BC. One of the passengers carried one of the most dreaded diseases to exist at the time, smallpox. This is where the BC smallpox epidemic in 1862 began. The mortality rate ranged from 50% to 90%, killing mainly First Nations, as they weren't immune to any diseases like smallpox. Once the disease started spreading, it killed so many First Nations to the point where they didn't have enough time to do individual burials, or even group burials. Dead bodies ended up everywhere in their communities. There were roughly around 30,000 First Nations living on the coastline of BC, and about 15,000 post-epidemic. But this didn't stop there. Through trade and travel, smallpox was spread to almost all First Nation communities in the province. While this was a disease killing the First Nations, there was a human side of it as well. The Commissioner of the Police at the time began ordering First Nations with smallpox to leave Victoria, which was the only affected area at the time. He fully knew this would cause these hundreds of people with smallpox to move to other communities in BC, causing everyone else to be affected. Stories like this, which there were many of, causes some people to refer to this epidemic as a mass invisible genocide, as the Europeans living in BC could have helped stop this by providing vaccinations and putting the affected in isolation, but they didn't because they knew it would benefit for them in the long run. This epidemic caused thousands of years of culture in First Nations communities to be killed off. Traumatized survivors have to fight on their own, large populations of BC to be completely depopulated, and a huge decline of First Nations population living in BC. The smallpox epidemic, the creation of residential schools, and the creation of the Indian Act all became at the close times, and as terrible as it is, without these three laws and events, BC today wouldn't be BC without them. We live and thrive in BC because of devastating events like this that the First Nations had to go through, and that's why it's very important to recognize and learn about them.